I'm going to start off with Sophia, though, and there's something she mentioned which has been right at the top of my mind for quite a while, actually, which I think is where we need to go with social value in particular, and that's stakeholder engagement and how do we engage communities. Can you just talk a bit about how, why, because you said it was really important, but I'd really like to hear why you think it's important and then how you go about that.
Why it's important, I mean, we can't tell someone how they want to live, and therefore I don't think we can prescribe the kind of built environment that they want to enjoy. The best places that I've ever come across have been people-made places that are built at the human scale. And so that's part of the reason why the engagement piece is so good. They're essentially a great asset for really good design and processes. How it happens is a much bigger challenge. I think it's one of the hardest things for the public sector and for the private sector to tackle. There's almost a fear of communities and what they're going to say, and actually coming and speaking to them directly. I feel like there is opportunities in tech for helping that, to help get the people more than the usual suspects along to community engagement meetings. But it is... Is that a sign to stop?
No, keep going.
I will stop.
Keep going. It's fine.
But one of the things that...
Our man's here. Hopefully he sorts it out.
That one's fine. Oh, okay. Thank you. But because it's one of these thorny issues, UKGBC wants to try and help the industry approach it in a different way. Usually the way we tackle problems is by getting a group of people around a table and talking about it. We don't think this is one of those issues. So we're planning an event in August, which will bring together young people from within the industry, academia, and innovative organisations to go through sort of a problem-solving 12-hour sprint to try and see if they, with communities as well, to try and see if there's a better way for us to talk to people and get ideas from them.
Okay, I mean, I think that's a really important issue. There does seem to be a real fear, I think, and that fear is displayed by developers who just are too scared to engage properly. They kind of want to give the community an answer as opposed to open the book and see where it goes. So I think it's a really important area. Can I just move on to Sue, who, as Wates, you saw the amazing programs they're doing. I mean, I was surprised how many programs they're taking. But Sue, you didn't answer for me, why bother? Why is this so important? I get the family piece, but is there a business case for it as well to embed social value into how you deliver, how you build buildings?
As you mentioned earlier, Guy, I think that trend that we're seeing social value requirements coming through in tenders increasingly and of adding an increasing level is certainly what we're seeing. So I think there is a real sense that our customers are understanding this better, and as Sophia mentioned as well, with government budgets being squeezed, I think the public sector is recognising that this presents an opportunity to try and get some of those social value projects or social ways of delivering social value objectives in a different way, whereas they may have been previously public funded and there's no longer scope to do that anymore. This is a way of rethinking that so that those same objectives can still be delivered.
We've spent 20 years getting our heads around sustainability, and suddenly up pops social value, and it kind of seems to have sort of jumped ahead of sustainability, perhaps, over the past 2 years. Legal and General have been embedding social sustainability for quite a while now. How do you what's the difference between sustainability and social value? And is there any difference? How are you tackling that within L&G?
I think, in a sense, social value has been around for a very, very, very long time. If you can go back as far as you like, really. But I think in terms of sustainability, I think they're, in a sense, part of that landscape. Yes, we have to think about the environmental side, we have to think about the economic side, but the social side is a key part of that and always has been. I think perhaps there've been particular drivers recently around periods of austerity.
Can you speak a bit closer?
Sorry,
into
yes.
it? Yeah.
Periods of austerity and certainly pressures on local authorities in terms of certain spending in certain areas, which perhaps has brought some of this more to the fore. But I think in a sense it's always been there. I think from our own perspective, we're finding there's just a greater focus upon it from a whole range of stakeholders now. And obviously we need to respond to that. And I think the key for us is finding ways to do it in a tangible way and in a consistent and replicable way.
Obviously, coming from a gas background, I'm completely biased. So, I've worked as a gas engineer for years. And I suppose...
Who's that? That's not me, is it? Are you turning that off? Should we turn that thing off?
Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Sorry, Malcolm.
I'm very sorry. I'm not a gas engineer, but yes. So I think in a sense, they're inextricably linked as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, thanks. So look, I've posed some 3 questions that I'm going to kind of ask the panel to pass their thoughts and also drag you guys in. So the first question is around measurement. And do we think there's a place or not for a sort of national measurement framework? And what are your thoughts about how we might be able to use that or how that doesn't actually help us take social value forward? Let's kick off with Malcolm, why not?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I think striving to get a standard framework for measurement is key. This is all about being consistent and being able to effectively understand what we're doing, benchmark what we're doing. I said earlier, understanding what does good look like and how do we move forwards. I think that it is really important because one of the dangers, there is a danger that if you don't do that, you have a situation where there's more of a sort of freestyle approach to these things, and I think that potentially could be a risk factor. So I think developing a consistent framework is one of the things that we're particularly interested in. We need to understand internally what this means. So we hold our hands up and say we're still trying to measure exactly what this means. But then we would like to be able to use a framework that others can also recognise. Just one final point though I would say, and it comes back to the earlier point about community engagement. We have to, within that framework though, provide enough flexibility to enable us to develop local solutions, which are really important in this. So, it is the local community who has the greatest insight in what's needed. The local authorities often have some amazing contributions to make. So we need to have a framework, but that enables us to remain flexible.
Sue.
I think certainly, I'd echo what Malcolm said, and I think that the journey to start really measuring and understanding the impact is a very important one. I think traditionally at Wates, we've set spend as our target because probably that's easier to measure and we can gauge how far we are away from that. But I think increasingly it's really trying to answer that so what? So what if you've spent X amount of pounds? What does that mean? What difference has that made? And that's a more difficult challenge to answer. And I think it's understanding the different facets of what that spend has actually achieved, and measuring that consistently I think is really important and allows you to compare similar things that are not, so each project is different, but it gives you a similar thread so that you can compare how one project may be doing.
And does it help when you're involved in actual bidding with local authorities, bidding for work?
I think if the commissioners understand what they're asking for, then that makes a big difference. So I think having some sort of standardisation around that will help to perhaps level the playing field in terms of the questions that are being asked as well. So definitely, I think that there's a value in that as well.
Okay. Sophia.
Yeah. So the thing that is being quite rightly highlighted is ludicrous. Is if in the procurement process, 5 potential suppliers are asked to provide, say, £100 worth of social value, and everyone goes off and measures it in different ways and comes back with here's my £100 worth of social value, pick that. And that's something that we really need to improve on in terms of measurement, and that's a real driver for creating consistency. But Malcolm's right, it's got to be balanced with an essential part of social value, which is that it's so bespoke to local needs. And what provides social value in one place doesn't provide it in another. So we've got to balance that drive for standardization and consistency, so we're all talking the same language, with that essential element of a social value approach.
Hardy from Mace.
From where?
Mace.
Mates.
I think there is a need for standard measurement, but the problem being is what, as I've said on the panel, is it's very bespoke and it's very subjective. I work with Network Rail when we put together the national framework for rail, and that still doesn't cover everything that is done within rail. So I think that you're going to end up with a framework that actually is so large and so unwieldy that people will stop using it. So I think that what we need to do is have some standard measurements on certain things and then allow other things to be measured in different ways.
So have a kind of a minimum standard then. Yeah, that makes sense.
We've been measuring social value. We've actually just started measuring it on all of our projects using our own formula, and it is quite subjective. It's, you can look at what level of apprenticeship, what level of intervention. So it does actually become a full-time job for someone to do.
Yeah.
But it is a very valuable tool to measure the impact on what you're doing and what is successful and what can then be used on other projects.
But one of the things that the National TOMS does, it publishes one value for an apprentice, one value for a work placement, so that you're then competing on how many you're doing as opposed to the value. So that's one thing you might consider.
My name is Richard. I run a very small environmental business, which is environmental design. I thought Sophia's point was really accurate about if you talk to people about what is social value, you get 100 different answers. If you talk to 100 different people, that's very true of environmental design.
Yeah.
One particular area that I've had a lot of involvement with in the last 2 to 3 years, due to what I do and provide, is urban air quality. And it seems to be like the Cinderella of a lot of environments, that once they've said, well, we're building this many houses, people are screaming that journeys that used to take 20 minutes on the roads are now taking an hour. Doctors' waiting lists in surgeries locally that used to be the same day, they're often finding that we've got a week for an appointment. And these are all very serious things. But also urban air pollution is very important. And a tremendous number of people, 40,000 people, as you were saying, are prematurely dying as a result of poor urban air quality. And it can be fixed and remediated actually quite easily.
So what you're saying about a measurement framework is include air quality in a measurement framework?
No, what I'm really saying is that between different local authorities, you first of all find that you have a tremendous variation in what's seen as the most important social value things to weight. And secondly, the worst thing is who's policing it. Because in the days when it used to be a local authority department, you had one very easy source to go to say you're either doing a great job or you're falling down on the job. My concern a little bit with some of the social value elements here is that it can be spun any number of different ways.
But it's woolly. Okay, fine. Thank you.
I'm Olivia and I work for Red Row Homes. We've developed our own calculator to develop the social value of our developments, and that's proved quite useful, also similar to what the lady from Mace has talked about. So I think people are developing different ways to measure it, but I think there's a bit of a challenge when it comes to the intangible things that you can't measure, and where that comes into these sort of calculators like community spirit and those sort of social value aspects.
Yeah, so I think at the particular example of local authorities setting a requirement for social value, it's almost like they should be paying attention to sort of 3 key areas. One which is their own strategic priorities, one which is the local needs in that particular area that the development's taking place, and then it's which organisation they're having a conversation with and what they can actually deliver. And if it is the case that in that particular location the air quality is really bad, even if it's not a strategic priority of the local authority, and it is something that contractor can, let's say if it's a contractor procurement, can do something about, then they should be recognising that opportunity. And that's when things become a little bit clearer and a little bit less woolly.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of it needing to be policed, and I think that that is absolutely critical. Certainly, we see on some of the frameworks a lot of effort goes into not only setting the performance indicators, but also holding us to account. And I think that where clients are holding us to account, that is absolutely the way forward. I think where that's not happening, we need to make sure that we're holding ourselves to account on those performance indicators that have been agreed up front.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, just on the, I suppose on the point about woolliness. I mean, I think it's interesting that we've heard from just two organisations in the audience who are measuring measuring things in their own way, which is really good. It's really good they're measuring. In the same way, it's good that people are taking forward these initiatives. But I think it does raise the question about the need for some consistency in how we are actually going to measure these things moving forward. So, the measurement and the value of them, and enabling people to compare apples and apples effectively. So I think that, we need to think about that and perhaps concentrate on that.
Okay.
Maybe pulling in some umbrella organisations who can help with that process.
Yeah.
I guess.
This ability to benchmark, to prove that what you are providing, the social value that you are providing, is additional to what would have happened anyway. And that's obviously very important within the sphere of planning as well, because if you talk to quite a lot of planners, what they say is, well, I've got a local plan, and that's been all formulated based on the local needs and strategic priorities of the local authority. Why would I need to overlay social value requirements into that? And it's a point that's kind of well taken, but I think the thing that we have to accept is that the existing planning system and processes are not actually optimizing or maximizing opportunities for social value. And we're seeing lots of local authorities who have included social value policies in their local plans, are using them as planning conditions, have SPDs that are particularly relating to social value, and they're able to get a lot more out of the partners that they're working with because of those practices being in place. So I think it is something that's going to become much more mainstream in the UK.
Just a simple question on the relevance of fixed price land transactions to trying to calculate social value. Because if you can control the price of the land, then the social value becomes more of a deciding factor.
I think you're right. I think, and I suppose the question is, who can actually do that at which stage in the process? Because I think it's an important point. It's an area that is not always necessarily in the control of the right people at the right time.
I'm sorry if I missed a bit earlier, but I'm a former chair of planning committee in Bristol. I'm a Green councillor there. But I've been scrutinising our property department as well as our planning.
Yep.
And in planning terms, something that's not a material consideration will get thrown out. It can't be the basis for a decision. If the local authority is the owner of the land, as the owner, it can apply all sorts of social value condition. And I've challenged our commercial property, our investment property, doesn't seem to share the same values that our community property or our own corporate property has, which is looking for social benefits as well as financial issues. Our investment properties are only interested in money. And I would like to see social value added to those. But as a planning committee chair, I don't think I would have been able to say the social value contribution.
You can use the MPPF. Yeah, so...
Can we? I'd be delighted if we can.
Yeah, I think
I'd like
you can,
it written into our local plan.
The MPPF does give you kind of permission to create a social value supplementary planning document, and that can be used as a material consideration. And then, to even strengthen that further, to have a social value policy in the local plan is a sort of a valid way of...
Okay. Thanks very much, because we've got a strong social value procurement policy, but we need an SPD as well then. Right, thank you.
Agreed. Yes, lady from Mates again. So I should remember your name. I've forgotten it.
It was just to say about the planning permission. So we as an organisation, we look, every time we do a project, we look at the local needs, we speak to the local community, we look at the indices of deprivation, we look at the challenges that they've got, and we put that all in a plan and say this is what we'd like to deliver. The local council goes, no, you will deliver local jobs, apprenticeships and local procurement. So I think there's a really big piece of work to be done with the local planners around social value and looking at what's the most benefit for the local community, and also as well the legacy afterwards. So we stop when the project stops, but actually what I'd like to do is put in the legacy of further jobs and opportunities.
Can I just bring in Sue here? So I'm kind of interested, Sue, just on that point, which is important. You come up with an idea and the local authority says, look, I tell you what, Sue, we like your idea, but we just don't need it. Do something else. How do you go about ensuring that a local need is met as opposed to just saying, take it or leave it?
I suppose it might come down to what you're being contracted to do and what you choose to do outside of those contractual obligations as well. So I think that there is always an element of discretion that can go on around the outside of what you're actually committing to doing. And I think the continuity point is a really good one as well. I know that certainly working with bodies, like Construction Youth Trust, for example, they're looking to try and help to appease that sort of a situation whereby they would build relationships in a particular area and a number of contractors would have the relationship with them. Then they would maintain relationships with, say, the schools in that area so that it's not one contractor is there for a while, then goes away, then the new one comes in and has to rebuild those relationships. And I think that there's a real sense in this sort of collaborative piece to actually help to deliver support more effectively by collaborating with each other so that we can get that long-term impact cross-organisation, not just as individual organisations.
And I think I'll just reiterate that point as well. I think that idea of long-term relationships with local authorities, so we've certainly, in many cases tried to take a long-term view, places like Salford and other parts of the country where we're effectively maybe working with local authority for some, years, if not decades. I think with social value, it's really, I think there's a task here to actually, for organisations like ourselves and maybe some of the larger contractors, to demonstrate that we actually can make a difference in terms of social value areas. And you have to go through a process with them. I think we found that, in some of those pilots I was talking about, it's actually a matter of actually making them see that we've got something to offer, some value to add, and then build upon that relationship moving forwards.
Good. Just while you've got the mic, Malcolm, just can we talk a bit about assets and what the owner does? And I know we've seen a sort of greater interest coming from some of the investors who ultimately own much of our property. Just tell us a little bit about those drivers and how you're seeing them manifest themselves within your business.
Yes, I mean, I think I mentioned in my presentation, investor interest in this has been growing rapidly. So we're almost on a daily basis being asked by investors, because we not only invest our own money, but we also manage the investments of lots of other people too. And a lot of those funds are coming to us on a daily basis saying, what are you doing in this area? In many cases, they're becoming more and more sophisticated. They're employing their own experts who have, who understand the landscape. They understand the progress that's being made in certain areas, and they expect to see these things being implemented, and they expect to see them manifesting themselves in the assets that we're managing on their behalf. And I suppose, part of that is their own corporate responsibility in some cases, but also some of it is directly related to what they perceive as an increasing asset value. So they see, social value as a good thing to do in terms of increasing the asset value of these properties and these investments. So, they're certainly the sort of pressures that we're increasingly feeling, and we obviously need to respond to.
Do we have any investors or owners of property in the audience at all? No, has anyone got any comment around sort of just the pressure of Yes, sir.
I like to introduce myself. I'm an apprentice myself, so obviously I'm an example of good social value.
Excellent.
Which I'm a year and a half in property management, so I'm really enjoying it, which is from University College of Estate Management and from Chartered Surveyors Training Trust. Okay. So it's kind of an organisation set up to help social value around the local communities. I kind of work for a client or for an overseas landlord who invests obviously in a portfolio of properties around the estate, and I think it's important that we educate them and obviously the client so they know what they're investing in, because that's one of the difficult things, is obviously getting their investment and their money to try and implement these ideas.
Okay. And that's really important contribution. So ultimately, this is about delivering something for people. Young person here, whatever it is. It's not the thing about social value, I think, where it makes it slightly distinctive from sustainability for me, it is ultimately about stuff that happens in communities and putting a value and actually measuring the real activity and the output from that. We've just got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to give us a kind of, just not a short-term view, a medium view. The next sort of 12 to 18 months, where are we going to see social value and what's driving it? So I'm going to kick off with Sophia, who does a lot of thinking around this. Go on, Sophia.
I suppose I might as well comment on where UKGBC is going to focus in our programme. Obviously, the planning aspect and supporting local authorities with their requirements, that's one aspect. Second aspect would be around measurement, working with members to understand how we can create consistency while we still balance it with local needs. Better understanding the business case for all parties so that we can convince people who aren't already doing amazing work in this area that it's something that they should be doing. And then also that community engagement piece and seeing what UKGBC can do to help that relationship.
Thank you, Sophia. Sue.
I think I would certainly agree with I think the measurement and the impact, just the dialogue is going to carry on. I think that we're going to see more of that and just understanding that. So what does it matter? What impact is being achieved? I think we are going to see more collaboration, and I'm certainly keen for Wates to be playing a role in collaborating across our sector in terms of how we can drive this forward. And I think that it's understanding that there are so many reasons to get involved, and that if you're not getting involved for your own business commercial reason, if you're not getting involved to create a positive impact in the communities you work in, get involved because you're going to attract future people to your pipeline of organisations. There are so many different angles to support social value.
Malcolm.
Yes, and I think really it's building on what I said earlier. Certainly from our perspective, next 12 to 18 months is about consistent measurement. So we really need to understand. We've identified some good pockets, but now we need to measure across a much broader front, so we can understand what it means to us. And also, I think picking up on Friend's point here, property management. It's developing a way to then communicate what we've found to our investors and to our customers and to the world at large. And I think this comes back to, yes, developing our own in-house understanding, but then also trying to work with others so we can develop more of a consistent landscape and collaborate on that so that we can measure consistently and benchmark consistently. I think that's what our sort of challenge is, so that we can then target properly and then measure how we're doing in terms of reaching those targets. So that's
Good. Okay. So, Sophia, Sue, Malcolm, everyone here, thanks very much for your contributions.